Alright y'all, welcome back to the channel and to some more turkey patterning, and today we've got another really interesting combination to try out that I think could be surprisingly decent for what it is. So I'm definitely looking forward to trying it and seeing what happens. Now real quick right off the bat, still working through setting up a little bit of a new microphone, so bear with me if the audio doesn't quite sound like normal for the next few videos or whatever the case would be. We're getting there, we're getting everything dialed, so just bear with me on that. But as for the shells I've got today, I brought out some of these, the Winchester Super-X turkey shells, but these ones are the 12 gauge 2 3/4 inch 1.5 ounce payload of 4-shot, moving about 1260 feet per second. We've tried our fair share of Super-X turkey shells on the channel, but we've never tried a 2 3/4 inch version of them. So when I saw these, and they were on sale when I saw them as well, I had to pick them up to see if the 2 3/4 inch version was any good or not. Because sometimes these 2 3/4 inch shells can surprise you and give you a really nice performance. They got a little bit less payload and they are a 4-shot, so I don't know. We'll see what they look like. But as for the setup we're going to run those through, I brought out my Remington 1187. It has a 28-inch barrel on it, and for the choke, I decided to go with something that is a very basic entry-level starting point here, that being the HS Strut UnderTaker 665 constriction. We've tested this choke a number of times, and for being a $15 to $20 choke, that's a basic 665, it has given us some surprisingly good performances, even with a Super-X and XX shell and stuff like that. So maybe this combo is simple enough to where it'll really work out with a lead 4 in a 2 3/4 inch shell like that. I don't know, we'll see. But as for today's test, everything is the same as usual. I've got the turkey target set up at 40 yards and the chronograph so we can get our velocity from the shell. So let's get you guys a view of that target and see what these 2 3/4 inch Super-X 4s can actually give us, and if it's a decent pattern or just not quite enough of a shell. Alright, so that shell gave us 1387 through the chrono. The boss claim is 1260, and we do have a 28-inch barrel, but still, that might be moving a little bit quick. Now, to be fair, they did sound like they were a pretty hot loaded shell, so that number could be correct in theory, but it wouldn't surprise me if that was a little bit of a misread, because those shells did look like they had a lot of little paper bits and cardboard bits and things like that that flew out with it, so it very well could have been a little bit of a misread. Either way, if we're even up close to 1300 with lead 4, that's more than enough velocity for them. So I guess, what kind of a pattern did they give us down there at 40 through that UnderTaker? Let's go check it out and see. Alright, so now we're down here at our 40-yard paper, and what we got is honestly not bad at all for what it is. We absolutely do have a dead turkey here. There are 2 right through the brain and a couple more down the spine that would have gotten the job done. So yeah, you would have absolutely gotten that turkey, and there's nowhere left or right on that paper that he can move to and get away from you. So that is absolutely a 40-yard capable pattern. Now looking at the pattern as a whole, it does give you a good little bit of leeway to work with, and it's not completely blown all over the place either. Now we do have to remember, this is a 2 3/4 inch shell, only loaded with a 1.5 ounce payload of lead 4s. So we just don't have a ton of pellet count to work with here. But honestly, for what that shell is, and for the very basic budget choke option that we've got in that UnderTaker 665, that's a very huntable pattern for most people. That's gonna be more than good enough at 40 yards, and in at 30 or 25 or 20 yards, it's gonna give you a little more wiggle room as well, a little more leeway, while still having more than enough pellets on target to get the job done. So we'll move in here and look. We don't necessarily have a super hot or super tight noticeable core area, but it is a pretty even spread throughout most of it right there. And I do think the area around that bird's head is a little bit tighter than the overall pattern is. So we definitely have a good enough core to get the job done. Around the edges, we do open it up a little bit. There are a couple larger voids in here, mainly around the outer edges of that turkey paper. So it definitely does open up a little bit. We might have a couple of flyers, mainly down there at the bottom, or potentially over here off the right edge maybe, but still, that's not bad at all for what it is. This could have gone kind of either direction. It could have been a pretty solid pattern like what we saw here, or it could have been a pretty big disappointment too, with a cheap shell and a cheap choke that's only 2 3/4 inch. It could have gone either way. But what I see here is a usable pattern that definitely has promise to get better too. If we run it through a little bit different choke, maybe a little different constriction, maybe a 660 or something, I think we can still get a little more out of these shells. and with it only being 1.5 ounce payload, it might give them a little more breathing room as well through some chokes, and it might actually help our pattern. So it absolutely has potential to get a little bit better than that. But if you wanted a very basic, kind of more entry level or budget combination, you had an 870 or an 1187, wanted a cheap choke with that HS Strut UnderTaker and a cheap basic shell with a little bit less recoil to it, but still have a turkey shell, seems like this would be a usable combination for most people. I don't think any of us expected Longbeard XR type performance out of these, but I gotta say, I'm pretty satisfied for what it is overall. That's a decent turkey pattern, all things considered, and I still think we've got a little more room to improve that as well. So not bad overall for what it is. And here is the wad from that shell. Very typical Winchester type of stuff here. Looks the exact same as what they use in their Super-X, XX, and Longbeard shells. But this one is a darker gray, and it kind of looks like a different plastic makeup than what they typically use as well. So is it something new, or just something with these 2 3/4 inch version? I don't know. But there's nothing stuck down in there, no major damage or anything like that. And I think it did its job just fine for today, so nothing really too important to take note of here. Alright y'all, well, what did you think about that performance right there? Like I've already said, I think it's pretty decent for what it is. It's a 2 3/4 inch shell loaded with 1.5 ounces of lead 4s. You're not going to have a ton of payload to work with, and I think it used most of it right where it needed to be. Now around the edges, we do have a couple of voids and stuff, but it's still nothing too major overall, and I definitely think we can tune it in a little bit more with the right choke combo. Maybe a little bit tighter at 660 or something might be the ticket for these, but for what the shell and choke combo is, I'll take that all day long. It's absolutely going to be 40-yard capable, and it's going to give you a little more leeway in at closer ranges as well. So I think for a lot of us, that's a perfectly serviceable pattern. It's definitely not Longbeard XR type of performance from a lead 4, but we really didn't expect that either out of a Super-X shell. So overall, I really don't think that's too disappointing. I think that's probably pretty realistic and a very good starting point to work off of as we continue to test these. So let me know all your thoughts down below. Is that about what you expected to see? Were you a little surprised one way or the other? Have you tested any of these 2 3/4 inch Super-X shells? And if so, what kind of results have you seen from them? Would you hunt with that kind of pattern? Or is it still a little bit too open or something for you? And what other choke combos do you want to see us test those Super-X 2 3/4 4s through? Let me know all that down below. But with that being said, I've got some more testing to get done for you guys, so I'm going to get back to it. As always, we've got the channel Instagram as well as the mailbox where you can send stuff if you'd like. All that information will be in the description if you're interested in it, but I'm going to get back to it, so I'll see y'all in the next one.